This online program by Juniper introduction to how networks the millions of miles of is long. When you think about or how a simple URL gets old, or you launch a simply all in, how is it specific network to be? So welcome to the how. We just work. Many homes are networked to sheet or a document with a coworker. There are two basic kinds of networks. There are two basic kinds of network types. Any group of computers on a single. Think about the last time you. There are two basic kinds of networks. LANs can be. Think about the last time you mailed a letter. To understand networks, these procedures for the OSI. Let's take a moment. When you send an email using our post, once the next layer are in an earlier. The physical layer. The protocols used at each layer of the 5-layer reference model are displayed. Click each protocol to learn more. The next layer check is done not the frame is the physics. The phys once the domain name file transfer the simple the sim the hyper user datagram protocol or UDP is a transmission control. The internet protocol or IP Ethernet Ethernet. The Open Systems Interconnection, or OSI, reference model is a layered, abstract description for communications and computer network protocol design, isolating specific operations to a Layer 1 Layer Layer 4 Layer To understand how networks work, it's critical to understand the two different types of addressing networks use. As we just mentioned, Layer 3 Here is the chance for you to review some of the basics about what takes place at each layer of the 5-layer networking model. To complete the puzzle on screen, drag each puzzle piece to fit an empty slot on the related networking layer. You are presented with one puzzle piece at a time in random order. Some puzzle pieces are labeled with networking concepts, and some are labeled with the corresponding parts of the post office analogy. Incorrect matches will bounce back. Match all items correctly on the first try to receive a perfect score. If you would like a hint, click any question mark in the graphic column. To understand how networks work, it's critical to understand two types of addressing. We will visit both types. Here is the chance for you to review some of the basics about what takes place at each layer of the 5-layer networking model. To understand Here is the chance for you to review some of the basics about what takes place at each layer of the 5-layer networking model. To complete the puzzle on screen, drag each puzzle piece to fit an empty slot. To understand how the Open Systems Interconnection, to understand here
बिल्कुल ट्रेन टिकट है सर।
तो हम कुछ ट्रैक्स के लिए कर रहा था, राइट। सी एन टी सकता हूँ अभी जूनिपर किसी हो आपके पास या फिर सी सी आई हो, तो ये दोनों इक्वलेंट माने जाते हैं। अभी भी एक सर्कल में है। इसके अलावा बात कर लेते हैं कि जे एन सी इंटरफेस को भी इसमें सबसे पहले प्रीफिक्स मतलब आईपी
Here is the chance for you to review some of the basics about what takes place at each layer of the 5-layer networking model. To complete the puzzle on screen, drag each puzzle piece to fit an empty slot on the related networking layer. You are presented with one puzzle piece at a time in random order. Some puzzle pieces are labeled with networking concepts, and some are labeled with the corresponding parts of the post office analogy. Incorrect matches will bounce back. Match all items correctly on the first try to receive a perfect score. If you would like a hint, click any question mark in the graphic column. Receive a perfect score. If you would like a hint, click any question mark in the graphic column.
हेलो बोल। हाँ ठीक ठीक। बोल। हाँ क्या क्या चाहिए? कल सिर्फ कंप्यूटर का लिखना है अपने को। हाँ वो एक्सप्लेन नंबर 6। हाँ कल अपने को एक ही है। केमिस्ट्री वगैरह अपना नहीं है, कल परसों है अपना तो। हाँ परसों है परसों। सिर्फ कंप्यूटर। हाँ सिर्फ कंप्यूटर। क्या? और कुछ नहीं है अपने को, बस जूनिपर करना है आज या कल में। जूनिपर वाला रे, जूनिपर जूनिपर। मैं खुद अभी शुरू कर रहा हूँ। बस कुछ नहीं, नेक्स्ट नेक्स्ट दबाते रहने का, स्किप करने का। अरे कुछ नहीं यार, वो पढ़ना पढ़ना पड़ता है, लेकिन अपन स्किप स्किप कर देंगे सब नेक्स्ट दबा के। और आंसर जो क्वेश्चन पूछेंगे ना उसका आंसर गूगल कर देने का बस। कल मेरे को नहीं मालूम, ज़्यादा बहुत बड़ा है यार वो। कल क्या बैठे बैठे कॉलेज में ही 2-3-4 घंटा लग जाएगा, 2-3 घंटा तो लग जाएगा ऐसा। सिर्फ स्किप करने में 2-2 घंटा तो लग जाएगा। स्किप सिर्फ स्किप 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 नेक्स्ट नेक्स्ट दबाने में। हाँ और अगर तू पढ़ने बैठेगा ना तो 20 या 24 घंटा लगेगा। लगेगा लगेगा, इसीलिए मैं नहीं कर रहा। मैं खुद का कर रहा हूँ अभी। हाँ ऑफ कोर्स यार, कौन बैठेगा देखेगा। सब आंसर अपने को मिल जाने वाला है वैसे भी गूगल पे। कर तू बस वो। कहाँ क्या कहाँ वो वेबसाइट यार, वेबसाइट पे और क्या। वेब मैसेज करता हूँ, मैसेज मैसेज करता हूँ। हाँ हाँ। अरे shit।
Hey player 1, do you think you're ready for this? Join Valorant and play as one of a global cast of agents from all over the world.
Here is the chance for you to review some of the basics about what takes place. Here is the chance for you to review some of the basics about here is here is the chance
बोलना बोलना क्या जूनिपर के आंसर्स हाँ वही है 40 क्वेश्चन के हाँ चेक योर अंडरस्टैंडिंग वो खुद से करने का अरे वो कुछ नहीं देख ऐसा उसका कुछ पॉइंट वॉइंट रहेगा नहीं और वैसे भी ट्राइज रहते करते रहने का करेक्ट अपने आप चिपक जाएगा आंसर ऐसा कुछ तो आता ही है हाँ उस पर फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा हाँ नहीं नहीं अपने को परसों देना है ना हाँ परसों देना है साथ में सबके कल सिर्फ ये अपना कॉम्स अपना कंप्यूटर देना है सिर्फ कंप्यूटर और ट्यूटोरियल है कल कुछ तो ट्यूटोरियल में क्या है वैसे ओपन बुक ऐसा कुछ मैं भी सुना था ओपन बुक करके हाँ तो पूछता हूँ मैं थोड़ी देर में कि ओपन बुक है कि नहीं ठीक है
your score is shown on screen. Click Next to continue. As we saw previously, data units are known by different names at different layers of a 5-layer reference model. Drag each term below to the related layer. Incorrect matches will bounce back. Well done. You have reached the end of this section.
पानी दो ना मम्मी.
Welcome to the Building Ethernet LANs module. Now that we have today's complex networks, Ethernet standards include a number of components. First, there are the physical. The second component we mentioned previously. Ethernet standards include a number of more about NICs. A network interface controller or Ethernet standards include a number more about NICs. A network interface. The second component we mentioned previously. Now what's important? In half-duplex Ethernet network, the second component receives the transmission. Ethernet standard more about NICs. A network interface. The second. Now what's important to remember about the CSM. On a network using in half-duplex. Now let's move on. Ethernet is the most popular and most widely deployed network technology in the world. You might have also heard the term 802.3 used in reference to the Ethernet frame includes the Let's take a closer look. Before we close out, let's return to the history of the Acme Company. The company grew at a rapid pace and, needing more space, expanded into nearby buildings. Ethernet has strict rules about the length of a physical cable segment as well as the number of devices on the cable. So, to accommodate this growth and add more computers and printers to the network, Acme Company used a network device called a repeater to extend the length of its Ethernet physical. In a LAN, now let's move on. Ethernet is the most. The Ethernet frame. Let's take a closer look at the Ethernet frames. Welcome to the building. Now that we today's complex Ethernet standard, a network interface. The second component now on a network using half duplex Ethernet. Now let's move on to Ethernet. The Ethernet frame includes the destination address is the layer 2 or the source address is the layer 2 or MAC. The type field identifies the length of the frame. The data field contains the checksum field. Let's take a closer look at MAC addresses and how they are used by a device. A MAC address is a 48-bit or 6-byte address that uniquely identifies a device's NIC. We will cover bits and bytes in Before we close out the subject of MAC addresses, there is one more detail we Let's return to the history. In a LAN using In the early 1980s, repeaters were used to extend the reach of Ethernet, as well as to isolate failing cables. However, each repeater that the signal goes through adds a small amount of time to the length of the transmission. To ensure that timing limitations are not violated, The Ethernet standard implements the 543 rule for deploying physical cable segments and repeaters. This rule divides the network into two types of physical cable segments: populated or user cable segments, and unpopulated or link cable segments. Link segments connect repeaters together and cannot contain end-user devices. So the 543 rule means that there can only be a total. Ethernet networks were 10 base T. At this, let's see how a bridge. A bridge operates at layer 2. The frame arrived. The bridge each base to now DAC address table, each of its sides on the same port where the frame arrived. The bridge simply drops the frame because the end user device has already received it. Because a bridge is just another device in the collision domain, it follows the same MAC protocol as every other device. It is important to note that bridges never change the destination or source MAC address. They simply look at the destination MAC address to make their decisions. Here's a chance to see how well you understand bridge functionality. The bridge has just received the frame shown on screen on port 2. What will it do now? Type into the MAC address table to make any necessary additions. Then select each action the bridge will take. When you are finished, click Submit. Let's see how Acme divided up their network segment. A hub are added to the network, though net heating for does occur, the bridge isolates the collision to a single domain. A bridge operates at layer 2. Screen is a bridge with 3 ports. Each port is attached to a hub, and each hub is connected to 2 devices. The MAC address of each device is shown next to the device. Ethernet bridges have 3 basic functions: forwarding frames, learning MAC addresses, and controlling traffic. A bridge uses a MAC address table, which is like a database, to help control and limit traffic on a network. Because a bridge is a layer 2 device, it can examine the source MAC address of each received frame. A bridge can then record the source MAC address and the port on which it was received in its MAC address table. Let's see how MAC address tables are built and how they are used to improve overall network performance. When a bridge first powers on, the MAC address table is typically empty. When an end user device sends out a frame, the bridge receives it and looks at the source MAC address. In the on-screen animation, the source address is now designated on the frame with the letters SA. If this MAC address is not in the MAC address table, the bridge adds it and associates it with the port on which it came in. Next, the bridge examines the destination MAC address. If the destination MAC address is not in its table, the bridge forwards the frame out all of its other ports. This action is also known as flooding. Because the bridge builds a table of addresses when they come in, the bridge eventually learns through which of its ports destination devices are located, so it doesn't have to flood each and every frame out all its ports. When the bridge receives a frame with a destination MAC address in its MAC address table, it can forward or drop it selectively. reducing overall network traffic. If the destination MAC address is in the MAC address table and resides on the same
मम्मी आपका आवाज ना बहुत आता है
port where the frame arrived, the bridge simply drops the frame because the end user device has already received it. It does not forward the frame to the other ports or segments, reducing overall network traffic. If the destination MAC address is in the MAC address table and is located off a different port, the bridge forwards the frame only on that port again, reducing overall network traffic. If the destination MAC address is a broadcast or multicast address, the bridge must always forward it out because the end user device has already received it. It does not forward the frame to the other ports or segments, reducing overall network traffic. If the destination MAC address is in the MAC address table and is located off a different port, the bridge forwards the frame only on that port again, reducing overall network traffic. If the destination MAC address is a broadcast or multicast address, the bridge must always forward it out every other port. Because a bridge is just another device in the collision domain, it follows the same MAC protocol as every other device. It is important to note that bridges never change the destination or source MAC address. They simply look at the destination MAC address to make their decisions. Here's a chance to see how well you understand bridge functionality. The bridge has just received the frame shown on screen on port 2. What will it do now? Type into the MAC address table to make any necessary additions. Then select each action the bridge will take. When you are finished, click Submit. Bridges were huge advances in the development. Here's a chance to see how it. Bridges were huge advances in the development. Now, let's look. You hear in this section. Normally, an end-user device connects to a port on a network device, such as a hub or a switch, using a straight-through Ethernet cable. Because there are two different earlier we learned switches do have we wouldn't be giving a true overview of today's Ethernet networks without discussing wireless LANs. As the name suggests, wireless LAN technology allows the extension of an Ethernet LAN set. Now let's look. The standards at layer. The generic 802.11 frame format is shown on screen. As you can see, it's longer than the Ethernet 2 frame. As we saw earlier, before the start of every Ethernet 2 frame, there is a preamble, which is used by communicating devices to determine the beginning of a new frame. Greenfield preamble can take a moment to explore the other fields in the 802. As we mentioned a moment ago, the frame control. Here are some common types of. Let's discuss how a client finds. Just like in a there are a number of frame control. Here's a chance to review some of the concepts you learned in this section. As we saw earlier, unicast addresses identify one specific device. Multicast addresses are associated with a group of devices, and the broadcast address goes to all devices. Do you remember how to recognize unicast, multicast, and broadcast MAC addresses? Drag each address below into the correct box. Incorrect matches will bounce back. Here's a chance to review some of the concepts you learned in this section. Well done. Remember, multicast addresses always begin with a 01. Click Continue to move on to the next screen. Earlier in this section, you performed a simple exercise to understand bridge behavior. As you know, switches operate in essentially the same manner as bridges, but have enough ports so that each port can be dedicated to a single device, instead of being shared. Here's a similar exercise in which you can apply your knowledge of MAC address tables and switching behavior. Use your knowledge of switch behavior and the MAC address on screen to determine what to do with the frame that has just arrived on port 1. Click one of the 3 buttons to forward the frame on one port or all ports. You will be presented with 4 frames. That is correct. The destination address is found in the MAC address table on port 3, so the frame will be sent to port 3 only. Here's another frame. Decide what to do and click one of the 3 buttons. That is correct. Frames sent to the broadcast address will be sent to all ports, which is known as flooding. Here's another frame. Decide what to do and click one of the 3 buttons. That is correct. The destination address is found in the MAC address table on port 2, so the frame will be sent to port 2 only. Here's one last frame. Decide what to do and click one of the 3 buttons. That is correct. The destination address is not in the MAC address table. Because the switch does not know where the frame should be sent, it will be flooded to all ports. Click Continue to move on to the next screen. We've covered many different devices in this section. Here's a chance to see if you can remember the characteristics of each device. Each device below is associated with a characteristic, but only one of the associations is valid. Click the box that correctly identifies a characteristic of the device shown. You have 10 tries. How many correct answers can you identify? Here's a chance to review some of the concepts you learned in this section. As we Well done. Remember, multicast addresses always begin. Earlier in this section, you performed a simple exercise. That is correct. Here's another frame. Decide what to do and click. That is correct. Here's another frame. Decide what to do. That is correct. Here's one last frame. Decide what to do and click one of the three. That is correct. The destination. You've used your 10 tries. Your score is shown on screen. To try the exercise again, click the. We've covered many different devices in this section. We've covered many different devices in this section. We've covered many different devices in this section. We've covered We've covered many. We've covered many different devices in this section. Drag each type of WLAN architecture to the matching illustration. Some architectures are known by more than one name. Incorrect answers will bounce back. Well done. You have matched all items correctly.
दो ना बाजी नहीं नहीं पड़ा तीन क्या दो और आधा खाया अभी तक अच्छा बनाया पूरी अरे तू उधर क्या कर रही है यहीं पर देख लेना
Welcome to the Routing Basics module. In the last section, we segmented a large LAN or network into smaller collision domains using bridges and switches. Both these now note that either of the two symbols shown at the right left. You'll remember from the last section that each network interface card, or NIC, has a Layer 2 or MAC address assigned by the manufacturer. Devices might have multiple NICs or network interfaces if they require connections to more than one network. But every MAC address must be unique since these numbers are either assigned sequentially or generated randomly. There is no logical way to group them. Remember also from Section 2 that the first 3 bytes of the MAC address comprise the organizationally unique. In the previous section, we defined the term Now let's take a closer look at how devices communicate using both Layer 3 and Layer 2 addresses. If PC 1.2 wants to send data to PC 1.8, it first determines whether the destination PC resides on the same Layer 3 network or broadcast domain. The PC looks at the network portion of the destination Layer 3 address and compares it with its own network number. If the Layer 3 network numbers are the same, the two PCs are in the same broadcast domain and can communicate directly. If the two PCs aren't on the same network, they can't communicate directly and will need the help of a router, which is a Layer 3 network device we'll get to shortly. Next, network. The answer to that can be found in the concept of layering. Remember concept send the header, even the header thinking protocol. On screen, you can quickly see that very large broadcast domains cast same segments it works. Calls allow stream do each device. A router is a layer 3 device and forwards data from one network to another. To facilitate communication, routers must know how to reach other networks. Routers can learn this information dynamically using routing protocols such as the Routing Information Protocol, known by its acronym RIP, or the Open Shortest Path First Protocol, or OSPF, the discussion of which is outside the scope of this course. You can also statically configure this information on the router. With either approach, a router stores this network location information in a routing table that includes all possible destination network numbers and how to reach them. Each entry in the routing table includes the destination network number. A router is a layer 3 device and forwards data from one network to another. Now that we have 3 separate networks and 3 separate the other ports, hence reducing network traffic. PC 1.0 Now that PC 1.2 is ready to send its data, let's take a look at the Layer 2 and Layer 3 addresses that are included in the frame and the encapsulated packet. See if you can identify each of the data elements on screen by dragging a label from the Possible Labels box to the appropriate empty label on screen. Incorrect matches will bounce back. After Layer 2 encapsulation is complete, PC 1.2 converts the data to ones and zeros and sends it over the wire. The ether since in our previous example, the router's Ethernet transmission on the frame. Here's a chance to test your knowledge. As you saw in this section, different devices need access to different layers of data in the 5-layer model in order to send data to its destination. In the simplified network diagram on screen, let's assume PC 1.8 is sending data to PC 3.6. To get there, the data passes through various devices. For each device shown on screen, click a layer in the 5-layer model to indicate the highest level of data that device needs to inspect. When you are finished, click Submit.
दोनों वही पूरी बचा ही नहीं है क्या आप बोल रहे हो? जितना दे सक नहीं दे सकते मत दो, नहीं दे सकते तो ऐसा। हाँ तो रोटी दे दो, पानी दे दो। शान 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 शंख का पंखा शान गिराया नहीं है, वो मम्मी लाते लाते तोड़ दी थी। गिराया नहीं क्या, ऐसे ही हो गया? ऐसे ही हो गया बाबा। ये उधर क्यों बैठ रहा था? अरे थोड़ा ये आज कुकिंग किया नहीं, अब क्या करूँगा?
In our previous After layer 2 encapsulation is in our previous example, the routers interconnect different layer 2 technologies also connect different types of layer 2 networks. Here, that can extend in range up to 200 kilometers or 124 miles. When the router receives data from network 1, it strips off the Ethernet frame, performs a route lookup, and determines the next hop address. After determining that the data will be sent to network 2, the router adds a new layer 2 header and trailer using the FDDI frame format. Like the Ethernet frame, the FDDI frame includes source and destination MAC addresses. However, notice that the FDDI frame format shown on screen is very different from the Ethernet frame format.
ठीक है ना, दुख जाता है। मतलब कोई भूत भूत कह रहा होगा ऐसा 5 दिन बाद। हाँ, तो इसको तकलीफ है,
Trailer.
तो तकलीफ क्या है? पापा कुछ कुछ बोल रहे क्या अभी आप भी तकलीफ है ठीक है दर्द हो रहा है डॉक्टर पास जाओ ऐसा इसमें हम लोग क्या करें हवन करो हाँ तो उसका मतलब है बस दुख रहा है कुछ नहीं
After layer 2 encapsulation is complete, PC 1.2 converts the data to ones and zeros, finds network number 3 along with the layer address. But this time since the data is being sent on a different port. Now that PC 1.2 is now that we have now that PC 1.2 is ready to send its data, let's take a look at the layer 2 and layer 3 addresses that are included in the frame and the encapsulated packet. See if you can identify each of the data elements on screen by dragging a label from the back. Well done! You have correctly identified each of the addresses in the data. Remember that the next. After layer 2 encapsulation is complete, PC 1.min on, in this case, the work portion of the layer 3 address, since the data in layer 2 header including 2 is complete. In the learning activities at the end, in our previous example, here's a chance to test your knowledge. As you saw in this section, that device needs to inspect. When you are finished, click Submit. One or more of your selections was incorrect. Click Continue for an explanation of the correct answers. In our previous example, here's a chance to test your knowledge. As you saw in this section, different devices need access to different layers of data in the 5-layer model in order to send data to its destination. In the simplified network diagram on screen, let's assume PC 1.8 is sending data to PC 3.6. Well done! You correctly indicated which level of data must be accessed by each device in order to send the data. Continue to move on to the next screen. Here's a chance to recall what you've learned about Layer 2 and Layer 3 addressing. In the field,
खाना खाने से पहला खाना ही तो खा रहा हूँ तो पहला ये काम करने का तू ये साथ में ये करेगा साथ में करेगा अरे तू खाना खा ले पहले, बाद में तू सबको पढ़ेगा। अरे हाँ।
Several fields are missing in the routing tables shown on screen. Examine the network configuration and complete the missing fields. When you are finished, click Submit. Welcome to the IP. So far, we have covered Layer 2 and earlier you IP has evolved over time. Most people today are familiar. When a computer needs to send data, the internet each device in an IP-based network must have a unique IP address. As we mentioned, when humans deal with numbers, we use the decimal number. While the decimal system is a base 10 system, the binary number system is a base 2 system. This system uses only 2 digits, 0 and 1. In the binary number system, each position represents a power of 2, as shown on screen. In this table, we show places for the first 8. Let's look at. Now it's your turn. Now you need to determine. Here is the full binary to dotted decimal conversion. Now it's your turn. You need to determine the binary equivalent of the third octet. Start from the left side of the table and enter a 1 or 0 depending on whether the power of 2. Now, here is the full dotted decimal IP address converted into its binary equivalent. We just learned how to convert a binary number into its decimal equivalent and a decimal number into its binary equivalent using IP. Now that you know, and the ones place must all be turned on. We have gone ahead and converted the 5th byte. Now it's your turn. Convert the last byte into its decimal and binary equivalents. Type your answers into the boxes on screen. When you are finished, click Submit. During the Ethernet discussion, we learned that if a device needs to send the same data to every device on the network, it uses a broadcast destination MAC address. The broadcast MAC. Now that we know how to convert, the introduction of. Originally, IP network numbers always fell on an octet boundary. This scheme divided the IP address space into different sized chunks or classes of addresses. In just a few moments, we'll take a look at how you can determine a network number when a network mask does not fall on an octet boundary. But first, let's finish with our example. Our network is shown on screen. Devices use network masks to determine their network prefix. But a network mask also identifies the valid host numbers on a given network. In any network, the first address, where all host bits are, identifies the network number. Let's quickly recap some of the concepts we've learned with an example. When we last visited the Acme company, they were growing their network, expanding into several buildings on a single campus. Now they've decided to build a new manufacturing facility in a different area of the country. Let's say that you're the network manager at the new location and you're in the process of developing your IP addressing scheme. You have been assigned the address range of 192.168.3.0/24. This CIDR notation, also known as a CIDR block, represents the address range 192.168.3.0 through 192.16. You create a subnet by changing the mask assigned to each broadcast domain. Said another way, you extend the size of the mask, creating more network numbers with fewer hosts per network. The original address range used the first 24 bits for the network portion of the address, leaving 8 bits for the host portion. To create a subnet, you adjust how many of the 8 bits will be network bits and how many will be host bits. More network bits mean fewer hosts per network. More host bits means more hosts with fewer. Move the slider on the interactive visual on screen to see how changing the size of the mask impacts the number of networks. Now let's complete the calculations below and fill in the blanks with the number of networks and hosts per network possible. When you are ready, click Submit. Now, let's go back to the using the subnet mask and converting binary to decimal, we can start to. Now you try it. In this exercise, let's say you've been assigned an address range of. Finally, use the subnet mask to determine the 4 network numbers you will use. We've completed the first network on screen for you. Finally, use the subnet mask to determine. At this point, you might be asking yourself, how does companies or organizations obtain their IP addresses from their IS? A network host, such as a multicast IP address. Now that we Now let's see how data flows from a PC on one network to a PC on a different network. In this example, PC 192.168.1.2 wants to send data to PC 192.168.3.2. Again, we'll start by zooming in on the first network. Once again, the PC must first determine if the destination PC is on the same network by using its network mask to extract the network number from the destination IP address. This time, the two PCs. Here's a chance for you to perform some of the actions of a router. Now, let's return to our discussion about longest match routing. Earlier, we used the postal analogy to describe how a letter gets to its final. Finally, before we leave. So, what happens when a router receives an IP packet that is larger than the next layer? You are now familiar with the structure of IPv4 addresses, which are used in most home and business networks. Although address exhaustion was a major reason for development of IPv6, it provides several other improvements over IPv4 as well. IPv6 eliminates the need for network address translation, or NAT, which one of the main changes in frame format in IPv6 is that the header is now a fixed length. IPv4 headers have an options field of variable length, which means that. Let's take a closer look at IPv6 addressing. At first glance, an IPv6 address can look alarmingly complicated. IPv6 presents a 128-bit address in 8 16-bit hexadecimal sections separated by colons. However, IPv6 does allow for abbreviation. Consider this example. You might think that you are looking at three different IP, while IPv4 and IPv, the process of subnetting IPv, just like with IPv4. At this point, we now know how IPv4 and IPv6 addressing. Do you remember how to represent IPv6 addresses following the requirements of RFC 5952? For each IPv6 address that appears, select the correct canonical short form of the address. At this point, do you remember how to represent? Welcome to the WAN Technologies module. Can you distinguish fact from fiction? You'll be presented with three sets of statements. In each group, two statements are true and one is false. Identify the two true statements in each group and click Submit. Here's a chance. Can you distinguish fact from fiction? You'll be presented with three sets of statements. Welcome to the Transport Layer Protocols module. For this activity, let's say that a client and web server have already established connectivity using TCP's three-way handshake. The client's initial sequence number is 100. The client sends 800 bytes of data and an ACK number to the server. What will be the web server? Not quite. Not quite. That is correct. As the client indicated, the server will also return an ACK number. Welcome to the Transport Layer Protocols module. Now, before we can discuss how data, the size of the window can change as now you have a chance to see if you remember some key characteristics of UDP and TCP. For each phrase that appears on screen, determine whether it is both. For this activity, let's say that a client and web server have. That is correct. As the client, the server will also return an ACK number. Welcome to the Transport Layer Protocols module. So far in this course, when you send an let's read software let's you might remember from section 1 that UDP is like dropping your letter in the mailbox and hoping for the best. Because the header only contains a simple checksum, UDP provides limited error checking capabilities and no recovery mechanisms. Even the checksum is optional. So, in effect, aside from the multiplexing capabilities, applications using UDP interact almost directly with IP in the network layer. Because the UDP header is only 4 fields, the header and data together are often referred to. Applications for which speed is more important than reliability use UDP. In addition to DNS, other applications using UDP include the TFTP, SNMP, and many streaming video and audio applications. If you a reliable connection. Now that we have covered the basics of TCP, let's take a look at the protocol in a bit more detail. We just learned that before any data can be exchanged, two hosts must first establish a TCP connection using a three-way handshake. The handshake establishes connectivity between the two communicating devices. Let's take another. Once the TCP connection is established, the PC. Now you have a chance to see if you remember some key characteristics of UDP. Not quite. Not quite. That is correct. Both UDP and TCP. Now you have a chance to see if you remember some key characteristics of UDP and TCP. Now you have a chance to see if you remember some key. That is correct. Both UDP and TCP. The second characteristic is connection-oriented. Is this characteristic of UDP only or TCP only, or both? Not quite. Try again. Not quite. That is correct. TCP is a connection. The third characteristic is uses sequence numbers. That is correct. TCP uses The final characteristic is provides limited. That is correct. UDP provides limited error checking and no recovery mechanisms. In contrast, for this activity, let's say that. That is correct. The server will also return an ACK number. What ACK number will the server return? Select. Not quite. Try again. Not quite. That is correct. The client sent 800. In this section, test your knowledge of everything you've learned. In this exercise, you will help us transmit a DNS request to the DNS server. Bring it out is part of the challenge. The sending computer generates a DNS request, which is handled. That's incorrect. The data will be sent using the UDP transport layer. That's correct. Click Continue. Layer 4 encapsulates the MIT.
देखोगे ये वाला सीन?
That's in the network layer addresses the packet using the sending computer. That the sending. That's incorrect. The source. That's in, that's after. That's that's the best method.
इधर बैठेगा तू, इधर फिर करके बैठ गया सब रे। ये क्या कर रही है रे तू? कौन किया? मैं थोड़ी किया। तो पता नहीं कौन किया। नहीं मैंने किया। पता नहीं कौन किया। बोलो।
That's be, that's in the that's the transit LSR removed to its next hop. That's in
ये अभी अच्छा लगता है।
move your mouse. That's at which layer does the server know that the intended application that's at which layer does the server know which piece that after the server has received the data and you have reached the end of this section. Your score is shown on screen. If you would like to test your knowledge again, click the Retry button. This is the end of the course. Thank you for your participation. We hope that you have enjoyed learning some of the fundamentals of how networks work.
कौन सी बाजी? गोभी फोपड़ी नहीं गई। नहीं लाओ तो लियो थोड़ा लाओ, दोनों लियो। खुद को अभी अच्छा बना लिया था, अभी हमको क्या मालूम। चार्जर चार्जिंग का वायर दो ना मम्मी, वो मेरा वाला चार्जिंग का वायर दो, और वो भी दो, डब्बा वायर दोनों, मेरा वाला मेरा, हाँ दो ना, वायर निकलेगा। अरे तो डब्बा भी चाहिए बोला ना, उधर लगाऊंगा, लैपटॉप निकाल दूंगा, उसमें क्या है? अब उधर ही हो तो कर दो। देता हूँ ना। अच्छा 140 का लगा रहा था, फिर बहुत चला वो 5 किलो लगा, अब भी आया क्या? कभी कभी है।
You have reached the end of this section. Your score is shown on screen. If you would like to test your knowledge again, click the Retry button. This is the end of the course. Thank you for your participation.
इसका आया क्या? 13,400।
Introduction to the Junos Operating System, or IJOS. In order to successfully complete this course and receive the most out of it, welcome to the Junos OS Design and Architecture module. By the end of this module, you should be able to describe the Junos OS and its basic design architecture. Junos OS is a trusted and secure network operating system. Junos OS powers the high-performance network devices offered by Juniper Networks, such as routers, switches, and firewalls. Junos OS, depending on the device, runs on a modified and hardened version of either FreeBSD or Linux. Having Junos OS running on all network devices gives another aspect of Junos modularity. Now that you have had a basic introduction, the PFE is Welcome to the Juniper Hardware Products Overview module. By the end of this module, you should be able to provide a brief overview of Juniper hardware products. Platforms running the Junos OS come in many shapes and sizes and are targeted for a number of deployment scenarios. The platforms running the Junos OS span switching, routing, and security, and are well suited for a variety of network environments. As the heart of all these platforms, Junos OS provides a consistent end-to-end IP infrastructure in both small enterprise environments as well as the largest service provider networks alike. Some of the routing devices that run the Junos OS are as follows. The ACX series products deliver simplified end-to-end provisioning and support Layer 2 and Layer 3 functionality with IP or MPLS traffic engineering. The fixed 1U ACX series models are environmentally hardened and support passive cooling, fanless design for outdoor deployments. For additional in-depth details on the ACX, one of the Juniper Customer Premises Equipment, or CPE devices, are a group of products designed to integrate Junos OS into cloud-based solutions. For a full overview of SDN products, refer to the Juniper Products Services website. You can access the website from the reference links document. The NFX series network services platforms are Junos OS CPE devices designed to provide faster custom service delivery on demand, including software-defined WAN or SD-WAN. These secure on-premises devices can run and chain multiple virtualized network functions simultaneously in an open environment. The NFX series also supports embedded VSRX security functionality. For additional in-depth details on the NFX series devices, refer to the Juniper Product Services website. You can access the website from the reference links document. Juniper is leading the convergence of Wi-Fi, Bluetooth Low Energy or Bluetooth LE, and Internet of Things or IoT with the enterprise-grade access points. The AP series access points work in conjunction with the Juniper Mist Cloud architecture and Mist AI. The representational state transfer, or REST API, can be configured on Junos OS requires a username and password for access. In the operational mode, you use the CLI to monitor and troubleshoot the device. The monitor, ping, show, test, and trace route commands enable you to display information and test network connectivity for the device. In the configuration mode, you can configure Junos OS, including interfaces, protocols, and user access, as well as
अरे डोंबिवली में है पर दीवा स्टेशन से पास है ना। कॉलोनी बन रही है। अच्छा है ना जंगल है तो। अच्छा है अच्छा है अच्छा है जंगल है तो। अच्छा है जंगल है तो। कोई डेंजर नहीं है।
unlike soft, you can easily recover. You enter configure by default.
पानी बिल तो अलग ही देगा
Use the configure exclusive.
तो उसमें तो अपने को देने
In addition to the, if there are two additional,
अलग करेंगे तो अलग बोल दे। अरे इन प्रोग्रेस क्यों आ रहा है।
unlike software for the you can you enter by use. In addition, if there are two additional
जगह बनाया जा रहा है।
welcome to the Junos.
कल बेला नहीं था आज बेला किया है। कल बेला नहीं किया था आज बेला किया हुआ।
The JWeb
ओबेरा में ऐसा आते हुए बहुत ज्यादा दिखते हैं अभी लोग। पहले तो बहुत कम दिख रहे थे अभी बहुत ज्यादा लोग दिख रहे। बच्चे लोग भी दिख रहे उल्टा तो। 200 तो काम कर लोग झाड़ू पोछे वाले और
on devices such as the VSRX. Once you log into the device using the JWeb interface, you are presented with the basic settings page of the device administration menu. That is Device Administration, Basic Settings. In addition, a pop-up box called Getting Started appears and overlays the right-hand side of the display. You can stop this pop-up box from appearing in future logins by clicking the Don't Show This Again checkbox. You can always get this Getting Started wizard back by clicking the Help icon, the question mark icon at the top right corner of the JWeb screen, and selecting the Getting Started item from the drop-down menu. On specific branch devices and in previous versions of the Junos OS software, the Setup Wizard appears when you first log in to a device that has not yet been assigned a hostname, factory default settings. Similarly, after you use this wizard the first time, you can get back to the screen on devices running older Junos OS releases at any time by clicking Configure, Device Setup, Setup in the top left corner of the. This is the basic settings page. The Management and Loopback Address section enables you to configure the IP address of the device, the System Services section, the Time section, when all the you can use the J when you log into the web interface on a router that has been initially configured. Welcome to the Junos OS Factory Default Configuration module. By the end of this module, you should be able to load factory default configuration using Junos OS. All platforms running Junos OS are shipped with a factory default configuration. All factory default configurations provide access using the root account. The root account does not include a password by default. Setting a root password is required before activating any changes to the configuration file. All factory default configurations also include system logging, which tracks system events. When repurposing a device, you might want to return a device running Junos.
बहुत ज़्यादा कम बनाया था इंग्लैंड के सामने। अच्छा इंग्लैंड फिर भी हार गई। ऐसे कैसे हार गई? इतना कम बनाया था 190 सिर्फ। दो दो वही 230। हाँ 230। तो आज बॉलिंग अच्छा खेला मतलब। फिर क्या फायदा है?
Welcome.
मैं तो बच्चा हूँ।
इसका इसका मेरे को फिक्र नहीं है, वो अपना आप करेगा। तू मैंने अपना मेरा बच्चा बड़ा वही है, समझा?
किसकी? क्या मेरी? पागल हो क्या?
वो नहीं करेगा।
पागल हो क्या आप? नहीं करेगा क्या? आप बेवकूफ हो क्या? आपका मैं गोपारिया में रहता है क्या? वही तो यार, गोपारिया वाले करते हैं, मैं बोल रहा हूँ। नहीं नहीं, गोपारिया में तो अपना सबका हो गया है। अनिलिया का भी हो गया है। अनिलिया कितना 2 साल छोटा है मेरे से। 2 साल छोटा है, तुम लोगों को क्या मालूम? मैं पूछा था उस दिन।
मेरे से
तो क्या 2007 का है वो? लिखा नहीं है,
2007 का
उसी ने बोला। लिखा कुछ और है उल्टा। लिखा
जाने छोड़, तू तेरा काम कर, पढ़ाई करोगे तो सब कुछ हो जाएगा। मैं ऐसे चाहता था ना तो कभी भेज देता औलाद को। हाँ, मेरे को इतना बच्चे को सक्सेस बनाने का है, कठोर बनाने का है,
आप बनाए होंगे।
समझा? दुनिया कुछ भी गांव वाला सब शौक है तुम्हें, इससे डरता नहीं हूँ मैं।
कोई नहीं बोलता बाबा, कोई नहीं बोलता ना यहाँ वाले को। किसी को कोई किसी के बारे में बोलता नहीं है, क्योंकि किसी को फर्क नहीं पड़ता।
बोलता है बाहर
नहीं बोलता। आप किसी के बारे में सोचते हो क्या?
अपने सामने नहीं
देखो,
बोलते।
आप ऐसा नहीं होता है। मैं आपको बताता हूँ। आप किसी के बारे में बोलते हो,
मैं क्या बोलूं?
वही तो, वही सब लोग खुद के जिंदगी में खुद का नहीं देख पाते, दूसरे का क्या देखते हैं? टाइम ही टाइम, वो तो बात करते टाइम बोलते हैं, बाकी ऐसा बैठे बैठे थोड़ी ना कुछ।
मेरा मोबाइल पूरा उतरा हुआ पड़ा है, तू कहीं पे चढ़ा है?
With local password authentication,
पागल है हिमांशु।
मेरा भी उतरा
you
हुआ
can
था।
configure devices running Juno's OS to be.
लैपटॉप चाहिए पर मुझे।
In this example, the authentic.
हाँ, देख जा। और तू अभी लैपटॉप चलाएगा तो सोएगा कभी? हाँ?
You can configure devices running Juno's OS. In this example, the authentication order is configured as. The predefined permission flags that group together the authorization of related commands are shown here. The permission flag details are shown in parts here. You can also view these permission flag details from the resources section of this module. The configurable permissions might vary between Juno's devices and software versions. Refer to the technical publications for your specific device and version of Juno's OS. You can use the deny commands, allow commands, deny con.
एक साथ सब कुछ काम दे दिया ना अभी।
This configuration example shows how the various.
मैं इंटर्नशिप कर रहा हूँ, पूरा दो महीने का इंटर्नशिप एक दिन में कर रहा हूँ, समझा? क्योंकि इतना दिन कॉलेज वाले हमको लेट दिए थे एक तो, और आधा से ज्यादा लोग का आज आज भी उनका चल नहीं रहा वेबसाइट। मेरा तो पहले दिन ही चल गया था। नहीं नहीं, और आधे से ज्यादा लोग आता भी तो नहीं ना।
मत लगा है। अभी मेरे को बोल
और
दी
कल
खुद
सर्टिफिकेट
करने लगी।
अपलोड करना है उधर।
हाँ, नहीं चढ़ा नहीं है तेरे पे।
मेरी ही जाली है। क्या 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 क्या, अच्छा। अभी हम लोग उल्लू बना रहे वेबसाइट को, आसान है इसलिए। झूठ बोल रहे हैं, पूरा कॉलेज एक साथ झूठ बोल रहा है। झूठ इसलिए सच बन जा रहा है।
System logging or syslog operations use a Unix. When using the standard syslog format, each log entry written to the messages file consists of tracing is the Junos OS.
ठीक है अरे पापा मेरे को फोटो खिंचाना और 2 साल में ऐसे पापा यूं करना बस अरे मेरे फोटो खिंचाते इधर फोड़िए ना फोड़िए यार
Trace options are also available at other configuration hierarchies, including the trace options statement at the Edit Interfaces interface name hierarchy level, enables you to trace the operations of individual interfaces. You can also trace the operations
दूध में नहा लेता हूँ दूध को
to truncate files used for logging. Use the clearlog filename command. To delete a file, use the file delete command. If you want,
अरे बाल झड़ रहा है कैल्शियम कैल्शियम नहीं होता है कुछ नहीं बोलता है मैं नींद ही नहीं लेना ना इसीलिए तो नहीं नींद ही तो नहीं लेना है मुझे मुझे नींद नहीं पसंद नींद को मैं मुक्का मार के फेंक देता हूँ हुश मतलब तिया भी नहीं लगना कि मम्मी
the Juno CLI is a powerful tool for monitoring Juno's OS devices. The Juno CLI includes several show and monitor commands that facilitate system monitoring. In addition to the Juno CLI, several other monitoring tools exist, such as Paragon Insights, formerly HealthBot, Juno Space, the JWeb, SNMP, hardware LEDs, and front panel displays or LCDs. Refer to the Juniper Network's tech library for specific details on a particular platform. You can access the website from the reference links document. You can obtain most system information using. You can monitor the chassis and obtain chassis information using the show chassis argument commands. The example illustrates the show interface's terse. Welcome to the Storage and System Cleanup Mod. Sometimes, Although plenty of storage space typically exists, it is a good practice. Welcome to the Junos OS Upgrade module. By the end of this module, you should be welcome Welcome to the lab section of the module. This lab
कंप्लीट क्यों नहीं लिख कर आ रहा?
Although plenty of storage, sometimes before upgrading Junos OS, you must download the appropriate image for your device from the Juniper Support download site. You can download Junos OS using a web browser or from the when upgrading Welcome to the lab section interface. Here are the details for some physical interface properties. Welcome to the Configuration Group's Welcome to the basic routing concepts. Welcome to the Routing and Forwarding Tables module. By the end of this module, the example displays a sample for 0.0.
एक दो तीन चार पाँच पाँच लोग हैं।
Welcome to the static routes module. By the end of this module, you should be able. Static routes are route.
राशन कार्ड के जेरॉक्स और पैन कार्ड आधार कार्ड के जेरॉक्स क्या 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 करने अरे क्या करने के लिए बस हो गया राशन कार्ड जरूरत नहीं राशन कार्ड की जरूरत नहीं आधार कार्ड पैन कार्ड हाँ बस और क्या चाहिए बस बाकी डिटेल भर ले बस हाँ नाम एड्रेस वगैरह लिखना है फोटो चाहिए रहेगा तेरा एक
Welcome to the Junos OS Import and Export Routing Policies module. By the end of this module, you should.
पाउडर नहीं डाला था और बहुत ज्यादा डाला पाउडर था ही नहीं हल्दी था हल्दी था हल्दी पाउडर आता तो उसका मीठा मीठा बास आता मेरे को पता चलता तो सो जाओ किस चीज का अरे एक सेकंड रुक जा अरे यार ये 1 घंटा रुक जा यार 1 घंटा नहीं मैं बंद कर देगी सच्ची हाँ हाँ लेके जाता है ये छोड़ ये लेके जा वो बंद करके जा मेरा उधर मैं बैग रख दूंगी और मेरा सामान रखेगी वो दिन में इधर ऐसे रख दो आना अंदर आ जाके पूरा सामान तेरा कुछ लेके तो नहीं गया लेके गए जो अपना क्या अरे कुछ नहीं लेके कुछ ना करते क्या लेके जाएगा कोई ना वो ना जो उनका होता है वो क्या बोलते हैं ये क्या बोलते हैं ऐसा रोल करने वाला क्या बोलते हैं वो भी उठाया था फिर मैंने रख दिया हाँ ये उठाया था वो क्या किधर आया फिर उधर रख दिया आने क्यों दिया घर में उधर से अपना आ जाता उधर में नहीं पर आने क्यों दिया अभी थोड़ा दिन से तो रात में आएगा वो पकड़ेगा तो चलेगा वो खाने की चीज नहीं लेता है आजकल रोटी
दोनों तो बाप रे, वो दोनों तो ज्यादा ही परेशानी में थे। तो तेल उनका सर में लगता था, वही अच्छा नहीं लगता। इसको तेल नहीं लगाते। हाँ, अच्छा अच्छा। गाय का तेल नहीं लगाते। तेल लगाएंगे तो फिर आने का बंद कर देने का। गाय का नहीं लगाते हैं तेल। ये सब दूध है।
Welcome to the firewall filter.
मेरा बैग किधर है? बैग 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 मिल गया बैग।
Welcome to the JTAC Support Case module. By the end of this module, you should be able to describe the recommended procedures to open a JTAC support case. The Juniper Networks Technical Assistance Center, or JTAC support flow, is illustrated. You will learn the JTAC recommended procedures and the available Juniper online tools later. Juniper Networks offers support only to customers with valid maintenance contracts, and customers must provide a chassis serial number when opening a support case so that their support status can be verified. Use the Show Chassis Hardware command to get your chassis serial number. Note that you can access the Juniper Network support website from the reference links document. Customers can open support cases using the Juniper Case Management Tool website or over the telephone. Note that you can access the Juniper Case Management Tool website and the contact
कटिया का रहता है ना आपने सोचा रहेगा वो मेरा काम कर मेरा नहीं मैंने लिया ही नहीं तो मैं कहाँ से बोलूं तो ना दिख रहा है अरे फिर इसमें दी कौन सी ये इधर ही पड़ा उल्टा चोर कोटवाल पर आते तू बोली उल्टा कोतवाल चोर को डांटे ऐसा बोला तू क्या नहीं नहीं हम सुने इसलिए मैंने ऐसा बोला अरे बाप रे इतना यूज कर रहा है क्या ये जो ओबीएस ओबीएस स्ट्रीम बहुत यूज करता है
Welcome to the Security Challenges module. By the end of this module, you should be able to identify high-level
सोना क्या मैं कहाँ से आवाज कर रहा हूँ पीछे ना मैं थोड़ा साइड हट जाऊंगा और क्या नीचे उतरो पापा पापा नीचे उतरो उतरो नीचे पापा homeboy
Welcome to the Security Challenges module. By the end of this, cybercrime is a common factor for any organization that is planning to implement and administer network. As your network footprint increases, the challenges of maintaining security also increase. There are more devices to manage, more policies, specialized for each situation. Maintaining enough trained staff members that understand the environment and the why of particular configurations can be a contributing challenge. How do you face all of those challenges when your rate of deployment continues to increase? On top of the growing threat climate, customer networks have become a blend of standalone or best-of-breed security products. This layered stack of specialized products might meet customer security goals, but can lead to a variety of issues. including operational complexity for administrators, isolated functions leading to gaps in defense, multiple vendors and interfaces leading
10 साल है ना।
अरे
हाँ हाँ
तू काकू को खाना लेके जा जाएगा।
हाँ, लेके नहीं जाते मेरी गलती क्या? क्या हो गया ना के? अच्छा साइड में मैंने रखा था वहाँ से बाहर कैसे आ गया?
शिफ्ट करना। हाथ तो मेरे को लगता है इधर
ये ले, अब वो कर दे ऊपर बाहर को।
कौन बोला? अरे चंपा लो तू उठ।
चंपा लाल कौन होता है? चंपक होता है। थोड़ा हिला दो ना। हाँ थोड़ा हिला दो उसको। ये
लाइट बंद करो रे।
कर दो भाई, बंद कर दो। क्यों नहीं करना? खाना दो, मैं देख कर आ जाता हूँ।
दे पर देते हैं। ताले का घर दे दे। आज न्यू आज कुछ कर लगे भाई। सुनेगा ही अरे तू खाना खिला उसको। साफ करने का है। इसीलिए आवाज आ रही है।
क्यों नहीं लगेगा वैसे? आराम से हो
तेरे को
जाएगा।
मालूम नहीं है तू काय पूछ रही है?
हो जाएगा ठंडा।
अरे हिमांशु तंग कर इधर ही।
एसी लगाएंगे तो फिर यहाँ सो सकता है ना? यहाँ
Welcome to the IPv4 versus IPv6 module. By the end of this module,
ठंडी से जल्दी नींद आती है।
अरे खाना देना तेरे।
अरे गालू डब्बा लिए ले, गालू डब्बा ले लो, ले लो। अरे सब कुछ कैसे एक साथ लेके जाऊंगा? दो की 3 मारना पड़ जाएगा। 3 की 4 मारना पड़ जाएगा। 4 की 4 क्यों सिर्फ और मानना भी पड़ सकता है। हाँ।
Stateless auto configuration consists of several elements.
IPv6
The Anycast address is a new type of address in IPv6.
skip कर रहे क्या फायदा क्या कर सकते हैं 2 महीने का चीज हम लोग 2 दिन में तो कर नहीं सकते ना उल्लू बनाना ही पड़ेगा ना किसी को फर्क भी नहीं पड़ रहा सर्टिफिकेट मिल रहा है फोकट में 90% का वो भी बढ़िया है oh shit लैपटॉप ऊपर लेके जा रहा हूँ ठीक है मैं